When I drive around, just on a day-to-day basis, people throw things out of their car. Occasionally, what people throw out is an interesting piece of metal or an interesting piece of stone or concrete or whatever. And I might pick up a very small piece of rusted material that I just found fascinating, but it's not like you're going out looking for the trash. It's just there. I'm David Bachrach. I do a lot of basket-like forms, but I also do a lot of abstract sculptures, some of which take on the form of birds, small animals, that kind of thing. And I work principally in copper. That's my favorite metal. And I've done that pretty much my whole life. Oh, what's your name?
Christian. I'm Christian.
Christian, nice to meet you, Christian. At Irvine, we're going to be doing 3 sculptures. One sculpture will represent land, one sculpture will represent air, one sculpture will represent water. The water piece is based on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a patch of debris, mostly plastics, in fact, mostly discarded fishing nets. That is twice the size of the state of Texas, so it's massive. It's a massive problem. Air is going to be, if you can picture a big donut. I chose a round form to feel like a sphere of atmosphere that you were totally surrounded by. And the idea of building this round form out of totally invasive things that actually hurt you or hurt us, hurt the land, gives me the feeling, or the same idea as when we release excess greenhouse gases that are causing global warming. The land will be 12 5-foot by 5-foot cubes that rise up almost like skyscrapers. You know, we've really cut up our land into cities. I mean, we make grids. If you fly over the country, it looks like a grid. You can't keep changing the land because it's more efficient for us without problems coming back on us. This entire project, which is 3 separate sculptures, are all based on a technique called Hugelmounds. It's a European technique that's been around for generations, where you pile wood and brush and let it decompose, and in 3 or 4 years you have fresh soil. What we're doing here is we're using that technique, but we're going to use it to create a piece of art. There's no rule against using it. It's a utilitarian technique, just like making a basket. There are people that make art from using basketry techniques. We're going to create art using the Hugelmound. I did not consciously connect my work with nature and the environment until about the early 80s. Even though I had done sculptures of birds and cattails and flowers and things like that, I had chosen them just because they seemed like an interesting subject, but I wasn't trying to address a specific issue. In the early 80s, I did a whole series of endangered species sculptures, and that was my first foray into a direct connection between what was happening environmentally and my own work. The more I researched a particular bird or a particular animal, the issue of the environmental crisis kept popping up. If you're interested in the birds and the animals and the insects, you almost can't avoid it, to the point where I felt like I was wasting my time if I didn't start addressing the environmental issues more directly. What we're doing first is we're preparing the site where the project's going to go. And the first thing we have to do is get rid of the invasives. This was also a dumping site. We're getting rid of the cinder blocks and the construction material and trying to just generally clean it up and make it safe to work in, number one. But number two, also start to clear out some of the invasive material.
I'm so excited to get rid of this tree finally. It's been taunting me for a while now.
I would say to Kyle, can we take this tree? Can we take? And you would say, are you kidding? Get rid of all of them. Are they going to take some of the top off first, or are they going to just let it drop?
We're gonna notch it and fell the whole tree right there.
All right.
So it's only 40 feet tall, so it's just going to be right there, right within your work area.
All right. No, I ask because right on the other side is a cherry that we may wind up losing.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to hit it.
Okay.
I think that's 41 feet and the tree is 40 feet.
This is a black cherry, so we are going to try and hold on to it if we can, but this is a goner.
The problem with this tree is that it is an invasive tree. So for that reason, you don't want to have Polonius just taking over this whole nature center, because it's not a native tree, it doesn't belong here.
Especially when you compare something like a native white oak that hosts like 500 something insect species compared to Polonia, which maybe can host 5 or 6 species. So a lot of it comes down to how many insects can a single species of tree host. The more insects you have, the more food that the birds have. And so this tree is really just occupying space that could be more productive for our native environment.
This becomes the material for my art because these are the invasives that I want to make the mounds from. This is the netting that I'm going to use on the mounds that represent water, because we are choking our oceans with plastic that we've created and need to do something about. because unfortunately, we wind up eating this stuff, whether we know it or not, because the fish that we eat it, ingest this material as it breaks down. And this kind of basket-like form that's now attached to this net is like a tumor, because that's how I feel when I look at the pictures of Texas-sized plastic garbage patch that we've created in the Pacific Ocean, that it is one big tumor that unfortunately, we created and we're not doing anything about. And so I'm going to create a series of these nets that will all be interwoven when we put them in place on the mounds that represent water, and they will all have these tumors made of waste material, waste metal, waste plastic that I picked off the floor of various places, and nets, and these cargo nets that were used and being discarded. And so if you could look at it from above, a big oval, the currents are kind of at the narrow end, and the accumulations of garbage are at the wide end. And these accumulations are more than a mile deep. So it's a lot of plastic out there. What I'm doing here specifically is trying to weave the branches of these pieces in as tightly as possible so that I get as tight a nest of material as possible, so that it's nice and firm. This sculpture is influenced by the greenhouse gas issue. It's got quite a ways to go, but most of the trunks in the base are Tree of Heaven, a tree that was introduced because it was pretty, I think in the late 1700s. And what's interesting about it is that you can chop the Tree of Heaven down, but that won't stop it from growing because the roots are sending up other trees all around it. And the idea that here was this thing that we've introduced, just like excess greenhouse gas, that's hurting us and that we have basically lost control over, I thought was a perfect analogy to use as the basis of this piece. We've destroyed, whether intentionally or not, by logging and tilling and draining and grazing and paving and development and straightening rivers and damming rivers and cementing over rivers so that they now flow through concrete drain pipes. We have done all these things, and in the process we have eliminated many of the insects, the birds, the animals that we need to maintain our life, to allow us to grow our food and to continue living as we have lived for the last several thousand years. Why the hell would we do that? Why would you destroy and make uninhabitable the land that you want to live on and raise your kids on, and hopefully your kids' kids to grow on. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. I have lived with this project now for almost a year and spent a great deal of time reading about environmental problems, and the enormity of the task in front of humanity to correct what's going on is mind-boggling. We've used our land as a cupboard to draw material from, and as a trash can to dump our waste in. This is my favorite view. I love this because it's like a river.